This is a repeat of the talk that I gave the other day at the Content Masterclass sessions. It's about creating a data-driven content strategy. I'm just going to introduce myself. I am Billy, so I am the person that's in that picture, just with a little bit more hair. I've been like making content for about 5 years now, at like some other different independent agencies. And I've been with Croud now for about 2 years, where I'm lucky enough to be the content marketing account director here. I've always made content. Basically, it's always been either like SEO on site, or it can be like off-site, digital PR, social media, whatever. I've done like events a couple of times, which was a bit weird, but I still enjoyed it. And I've been doing this for about 2 years now at Croud, and I'm lucky enough to work on like really awesome accounts like Timberland, Vans, the North Face, stuff like that. So I feel very, very privileged to be working here. But Croud offered me a really, really unique way to work. And just to explain a bit about how the Croud model works, is we split our tasks into 3 different types, I guess. So we have manual tasks, which are largely automated. So we use a mixture of like tools that we've developed and platforms that we've developed, like Crowd Control and Serpico. And then we use other things as well, like Datorama, to largely automate what we do in terms of the manual tasks. So things like reporting, all of that good stuff will be like automated. Then for our operational work, we rely on a network of digital freelancers that are based all around the world that we call Crowdies. And using Crowdies is like really, really key to what I'm about to tell you. Because basically, before I joined Croud, I would just be, like copywriting all the time, essentially. And that's what the Crowdies do now, is they do all of the copywriting, the dev work and the design and all that kind of stuff for us, which then frees up more of our time to focus on the strategy. And before I joined Croud, I couldn't really do that. I got my head down like every day, just writing copy all the time. Whereas now I'm free of that part of the job. Not like I don't miss it, because sometimes I do, but it gives me more time to really get to know clients and get to understand, their needs and their wants, and actually also look at the processes that we roll out to clients and just say, is there a better way that we could be doing this? And what I sort of really learned was, it just seemed like there was just no data being used in content at all. It was just very like, I think we should do this, or I feel. And a lot of the time we would, come up against like CMOs or CEOs, like people who have a lot of sway, and they will have just read something in the Guardian, and we'll have to pivot our entire strategy around what someone's read in the Metro that day. Do you know what I mean? They'd be like, I read an article about plants, so we're going to write about plants today. And because we didn't have the data to back it up, and this is not just true of Crowd, this is true of like all the agencies that I've worked at, it was just very like, we had nothing to fall back on. And I really feel like this quote is so true. Like, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And without us having that data to back it up, it was just a bit flawed. So I started to really think about the data that we're using to create content. And what I was coming across as well was, a lot of the time, this is especially true for on-site content, was we would just be handed this list of like SEO keywords, and then we'd be told like, you need to make content with this now, like off you go. And we're expected to somehow like create these amazing things, without really having the time to generate insights, which was a bit of a shame. So we'd be given a list of stuff that was always like very conversion focused as well. It'd always be like handbags or tree, like there you go, off you go, make something about trees. And it would be like, I don't know what you want from us. So I started to really think about, the level of detail that we were getting and how we could drive greater analysis, and really led to the development of the first framework that I worked on here, which is the People Also Ask framework. People Also Ask is like, if you're not sure what it is, basically, if you go to Google and you were to Google something like handbags, it would come up with like a little box, or like drop down box, and it will say like, what is the best kind of handbags, and or how can I, what handbag is right for carrying my water bottle or whatever. And that specific query, that question, that's the People Also Ask query. So it's very, very common. It's very widely used in SEO today. But I wanted to come up with a more robust way that we were dealing with it, and we were talking about what sort of frameworks that we could use. So that led me to develop this, which is first of all, we would export all of the PAA queries from one of our reporting platforms, Stat, and basically you can export all of them, so they're really, really specific to the keyword set that's loaded in there. So it'd be specific to the client that we were working on or whatever. We would then categorize all of these queries. So from Stat you get like, if you're, if it's like maybe 400, 500 keywords, you get maybe like 1,500 to 2,000 rows of unique data. And we sort of then categorize them. And with like, that many unique rows, it takes a little while. It takes about 8 hours, but it's doable. It's perfectly doable. So you categorize them into overarching like themes or topics. So it'd be like, waterproof bags versus shoes versus handbags versus whatever. And then we'd overlay some additional metrics and then use that to ideate off the back of. And the other metrics that we would sort of apply over the top gave us that really like granular way to look at things. So the first one that we'd look at was search volume. So obviously, people's ask data is like a search related data. So we would use search volume, obviously pulled from like AdWords. But then for me, when I was developing this, I was really feeling like, there's no secondary like quantifier here that we're using. It was just sort of like, this is the biggest search volume, so this is where we're going to start. And I was like, I don't know if that's really a good idea. Maybe we should actually look at how difficult it's going to be and can make some strategic wins. So we sort of looked at ways that we could apply difficulty, and we used a bunch of different platforms. So we used like a blend of like the Ahrefs keyword difficulty metric and CPC and yada yada, and used like an Excel formula to sort of calculate all of that and come up with a secure like difficulty metric. And then lastly, we would use relevancy as well, which is the second metric, which is calculated here. So we would calculate relevancy by calculating the total number of times that people also ask query appears in the keyword set in total. So if it appears a lot for your keyword set, that's really, really relevant to the keyword set. Whereas if it only appears like a handful of times, it's not very relevant. And using these three metrics, we were able to like plot everything in a bubble graph. So I'm like a very visual learner. I know, shocking for someone who works in content. But I found that this really, really helped. And also it really helped a lot of our clients understand as well the approach that we were taking. So you've got relevancy up the left-hand side and difficulty along the bottom. And then the size of the bubble indicates the size of the search volume that's available. So this is for Timberland. And you can see that there's like, top left, you can see very, very clearly, these are areas of low hanging fruit. They're very, very relevant to the client. They're not very difficult. And then some of them are quite sizable. So, you look at things like Chelsea Chukka and ankle boots. It's quite a sizable search volume. So it is worth creating content in that area. And then conversely as well, we could then look at, bags and luggage, tiny little search volume. It's very difficult, not very relevant to the client. And then this is the sort of thing that gave us a real like backing of, this is data driven. And also if someone was to come along and say, well, I want to create stuff about bags today, we'd be like, it's a bit too difficult. It's not really relevant, yada, yada, yada. So it gives us a bit more foundation to go off of. And I found that this really worked quite well and gives like a lot of structure to our like overarching plans for like a year. Do you know what I mean? Like the amount of content that we would create in a year, which was really, really useful. But then as I started to look around, I started to think a bit more about the other data sources that we were using and, what else is out there? What else could we use? And I started to look at things like Quora and Facebook and Reddit, YouTube, other places where people were having conversations on the internet that, that was concerned with not necessarily always our products, but messages or conversations that we or our clients wanted to be involved with. So it could be, around sustainability, those sorts of conversations, or it could be very product focused. So it could be like car insurance, for example. And I started to look at these, and Reddit is a great example of this. Like I bang on about it all the time. And I think people are getting slightly sick of it. But, if you can be sure that there is a subreddit for your particular product or like something that you want to talk about. So travel, there are always going to be people talking about it. The only problem that I then started to encounter was when we are talking about the people's ask queries, you have like 1,500 to 2,000 rows of unique data. Whereas when we're exporting from Reddit, you're getting into the like tens of thousands, like super quickly, but we still need to do that categorization in order to produce that strategic view. So that the bubble charts on the right-hand side, we still need to be able to do that. And without the categorization, it sort of fell down. So it was very clear to me that this was where I needed to focus my attention like quite quickly. And it led me to actually develop Solomon. So Solomon is a machine learning powered content planning and ideation tool that we built at Croud. It's named after the King Solomon, who is a figure in the Old Testament, and I think in the Jewish Bible as well, who's like really famous for his wisdom and his knowledge. So see what we did there. Thank you. And basically what Solomon can do is it can interface with a bunch of different like data sources and produce that strategic view at scale quite quickly. So it can go through about 10,000 rows of data in about an hour, which is obviously, considerably faster than maybe I could do it. But it works really, really well, and it gives us a lot more avenues in terms of what we can explore for clients and how quickly we're able to come up with insights and strategic plans. And the way that it works is, so this is an example of just Reddit. But what it will do is it will basically pull the post title, which will give us like keywords and themes to ideate from. But then it also pulls like popularity metrics. So these are different for every platform. So for Reddit, it's like upvotes and comments, but for YouTube, it will be like likes and comments, for example. But it will pull all of that, and then it calculates how interesting the topics are. And then we use a bunch of the other metrics as well, which is really, really useful and very, very powerful. And the way that I'm just going to explain a bit about like how it finds the keywords in post titles. So if this was your post title, right, 12 eco-friendly Christmas gifts for men, which was found on like a Reddit, or it could be the title of like a YouTube video or whatever, Solomon can look for bigrams and trigrams of keywords within post titles, and it will find them, and then it will assign them keyword difficulty and search volume. So in this example, it's found eco-friendly Christmas gifts men, and then it will apply a keyword difficulty for each of those and then average it, and then the same with search volume, and then average it across that. So it gives you a really, really strategic way to look at it and say, if we're going to create something for eco-friendly Christmas gifts for men, it's going to be 30 average keyword difficulty, which means it will need roughly about 30 links to rank. And then the average search volume is about 13,000, I should say, sorry. Just to point out the search volume, this is comparative. We're not suggesting that if you create 12 eco-friendly Christmas gifts for men, you'll get 13,000 organic traffic, organic clicks. It's more just like to compare between the topics. But that's how it works, and it works really, really well. So it can apply all of this at scale. It's very, very powerful, and then gives you that big bubble graph at the end, which again, super useful, I have found. But not everyone is in a position to be able to do that. I'm very privileged at Croud that we have a lot of developers in-house, and a lot of people who I consider to be a lot cleverer than I am when it comes to machine learning. So they were able to give me advice on how to do these things. And that's not always possible, and I completely recognize that. The other thing as well is, in some instances, we've had projects or clients where, Solomon's built for scale. It does like 10,000 rows of data in an hour. There's not always going to be 10,000 rows for a particular project or a particular campaign that we're working on, in which case it can be easier to just do it by hand. An example of this is we were looking for some interesting ideas around university living, and really the only place to do that was the student room. And even then, so that was like already whittled down to one. And then even within that, there was just one sub forum around student accommodation that we had to look for. So we looked through it, and we categorized it, and we followed the same like 4 steps of, pulling the data set, categorizing it, applying some metrics. But really, without Solomon, there was just no need, you know what I mean? And it boiled down to be a lot simpler in that all we had to do really was just look for outliers amongst the set. So what we did was we pulled all the data for, I think, like 4 years, and then looked for like an acceptable delta. So between the replies and views, so calculated the average and then calculated a small like range either side, and then what we would consider acceptable amount for both replies and views, and then any that went outside that. So obviously this is just an example data for you on the screen, but anyone that went outside of that range, that acceptable delta, we were like, this is something that we need to talk about, and this is where we need to be creating content here. And that's sort of what we did, and that's a really simple, like easy. If you're like a one-man band, for example, or if you're a 2-person band, you can do this quite simply and quite quickly, and it will give you a bit more data to go off of when you're creating your strategy in the longer term. And really, all of these different methods, whether that's people also ask, whether that's pulling the data by hand or using Solomon, all of them fall into this 4-step process, which is to like create your data set, categorize it so you can, analyze it more at scale, and then overlay your other metrics. The other metrics as well, they don't necessarily always need to be the 3 that I've listed here. It could be social data, it can be engagement, it could be whatever you need it to be. It's just more about overlaying that to give it a better, make your insights more powerful, really, and then use that to ideate off of the back of. I feel like I've gone more over time. They only gave us 10 minutes to do this masterclass, which is not a lot of time to like cram a lot of information in. So we're at the end now. But if you have any questions or, follow-up comments or want to ask me anything, please just add me on LinkedIn, email me. Unfortunately, I think I'm very Googleable. But yeah, so I will look out for your emails. Yeah, goodbye.